pradėsime šią programos dalį su pranešimu, kaip užtikrinti veiksmingą institucinę komunikaciją. Ir šį pranešimą darys ponia Mistina Zarnazi, Europos komisijos komunikacijos generalinio direktorato strateginės komunikacijos skyriaus vadovė. Ir jungiuosi į anglų kalbą, tik prieš tai dar priminsiu tiems, kurie žiūri internetu ir tiems, kurie yra čia salėje, jūs nuolat galite naudoti slaido, kad užduotumėte klausimus. Galite net nelaukti pristatymų pabaigos, bet jei jums kilo kažkokia idėja ar galbūt norite kažko paklausti pranešėjas, drąsiai uždavinėkite klausimus ir galite dar prabalsuoti vieni už kitų klausimus, nebūtina laukti pranešimo pabaigos. So I'm switching to English and presenting our next keynote speaker, Mistina Zarnazi, the head of the Unit for Strategic Communication at the Directorate General for Communication at the European Commission. So we're glad to have you here at our conference. And the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Tina. Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
And Tina, I'm wondering if we should start already immediately with the first few questions.
Yes, let's do that.
All right. So we have a couple of questions that are linked to what you're going to hear soon. And the first question is about main targets to whom you are communicating about EU-related topics. And Tina wanted to know, who are they? And try to vote. Again, go to slido.com. The code is K0930. And here are just a few options. Are you communicating mainly to Euro-optimists? Are you communicating mainly to Eurosceptics? Or maybe it's neutral. You're communicating to whatever, wide audience, not dividing them, and how do they feel about European Union. And votes keep coming in. Seems that the option communicating mainly to Euro-optimists is on the first place. So we have, by now, almost 60% of audience responding that actually they mainly communicate to Euro-optimists. So 1/3 say, did you also communicate to a Eurosceptics? And 5%, no, neutral. Okay, so 1/3 is saying that they actually communicate to both target groups. And 5% say that they're targeting their communication more to the Eurosceptics. All right, we're getting 44 votes by now. And probably we can move on to another question. Tina wanted to also know more about your communication campaigns if you are doing them. So if you're doing them, how long communication campaigns linked to EU topics are? And few options that you can see. It's up to half a year, up to 1 year, longer than a year, but also it's okay if you have never done any communication campaign. You can choose that option too. I was saying to Tina, let's include that option. Maybe people never did that, and that's also okay to learn about communication first and then start doing communication campaign. All right. 40 votes. Seems the voting numbers went down with more food in the stomachs. All right. So, yes, I hope you got some feeling who is here in the audience, and the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Lemonas, for this introduction and for getting people to start thinking about some of the answers to the questions. The questions, of course, are key because it has to do with the first principle of communication, which is knowing your audience. So I want to know who my audience is today, and also for you to think a little bit about who your audience is in terms of your communication efforts. So what I'm going to speak to you about today, and I really wish I could be there and have a chat with you and really connect with you, but we'll have to do this virtually for the time being, I'd like to talk about what we've been doing and calling corporate communication, how this whole concept works. What we've been doing in the past, probably some of it you already know, I hope so at least, and also to speak a little bit about what we're going to be doing from now and in the foreseeable future in terms of our EU communication, corporate communication. So let's go to the first slide, which is, next slide please. There we go, which is about what corporate communication actually is. So just very briefly to define this concept for those of you who may not really be familiar with it, it's about communicating about the EU as a whole, not any particular policy, but really as a whole. It is about translating the priorities into narratives that are understandable, simple, accessible, and resonate with people, and then to engage with citizens via the channels that they use. So don't expect them to come and read our press release or come to our website, but go to the channels that they use. Now, how do we do this? We have this acronym that happens to be Europe, just by accident. So the E stands for using the European emblem, so not making the distinction between the different institutions. The U stands for having a unified messaging, so that you don't try to cover too much ground and lose yourself. The R is for using real stories about real people who have been benefiting from the EU. And the O is about speaking the language of ordinary people, thinking about people not necessarily the stakeholders who are deeper into the topics, but really the ordinary citizens. The P is for personalizing it as much as possible, personalizing, customizing, making it local, making it understandable to people for their context. And the E is something that we didn't do very much before. It's about using emotions in our communication. And you will see a little bit how this works in practice. Next slide, please. So these are some of the campaigns that we ran in the previous years, some of these corporate communication campaigns. And I hope, if I were there, I would also ask you to raise your hands to see how many of you have seen one or two or more of them. I don't know, Laimonas, if you can ask that and see what...
Sure, we can do that. We can go one by one. What do you say?
No, okay. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. So
InvestEU?
Yeah, InvestEU. Who have done anything about it? Or what's the question, Tina?
Who has seen it? Who knows it?
Who knows it? Who ever heard, knows InvestEU? Let me see. We have around 20 hands up.
Very good. Okay.
Thank you.
EU and me?
I think more. Definitely more. Okay. More than half. Almost all, actually. I think it's like probably
fantastic.
Like 40 or 50.
Okay. And EU Protect?
EU Protect. Way less, maybe around 12, 14.
Okay, okay. And don't bother with the other one, because we didn't run it in Lithuania, but I was going to talk about it anyway too. Okay. So let's start. I'm going to go very quickly then through those campaigns, since so many of you know them. So next slide, please. It's about InvestEU. which so many of you already know. But maybe what you didn't know, and I think it's important also compared to the first question that or the second question, it's about the target audience of this campaign. This campaign, which seeks to show the concrete benefits of EU funding, was targeting mainly ambivalent or neutral Europeans. So Europeans who didn't necessarily have a very pro-European or anti-European sentiment, and who are really, as we say, on the fence. And these are the people we feel that needed that extra information so that they can form an opinion about what EU funding brings in terms of growth and jobs in their communities. So the next slide will show you some of the channels that we use for the promotion. And since you've seen it, obviously it worked. But I'll just mention the first one, because I think that was a little bit more risky for us, something new. It was the fact that we used out-of-home advertising. So we used billboards and we used also advertising in public transport, just so that we can show these stories in a different context and not just rely on social media or media partnerships and events, etc., that we did, like many other campaigns do. So this was one of the novelties, let's say. Next slide will show you the results of this campaign, which we count in 3 ways, at least 3 ways. This way, we also have the website visit. But we look at the reach. This is a potential reach. It's based on a formula which tries to eliminate the duplication from different channels. So we look at the reach, which is quite impressive, 240 million impressions. But we don't get impressed by the big numbers, because you really have to drill a little bit further. So we have also the website visits, which means how many people saw the advertising and then clicked and went to see a little bit more about the story. That shows more of the engagement. We have the video views, but then what we have, which is important, is the recall. It's something that we've been doing testing before and after the campaign, and see that about 25% of people who saw the campaign actually remember it about a year afterwards. And you're definitely in that 25, if not more. And then a very important figure, the one on the right, it's about impact. So how much have people changed their opinions because of this campaign? This is something we were also able to measure, and we see that we can increase the sentiment or the impact of what we do by about 5%. Of people who have seen it are more positive towards the EU. Now, the next slide will tell you about the campaign that it seems everybody knows, the EU and Me campaign, which was more for younger people. So let's move very quickly to the next slide. The promotion, as you know, happened a lot on events, happened a lot with bannering on Google, and with a lot of activations like competitions, like also going to events, music festivals, political festivals, cultural gathering, film, sports events. So to be where people are. So obviously it worked because you have seen it. And then the next slide shows you some of the content that we created, which was, in this case, these are the Lithuanian testimonials that we had, young people telling the story of how the EU helped them, either as an entrepreneur of beanbag chairs or a popular talk show host with a travel portal. I won't try to pronounce the names, they're unpronounceable for me. But you see that all these people who we reached out to and did those testimonials give their perception of Europe and how Europe has helped them. Next slide will show you the results of that campaign, which were also very good, more focused now, because we had a more focused in the age audience. And you also see we're very proud of the video views here, because we based a lot of the campaign on video, and obviously that worked very well. Moving on to EU Protects. This is a campaign, fewer of you have seen it. It was for slightly older audiences in Europe, neutral, and those who feel more, let's say, anxious about various problems, challenges in Europe. And it's about to reassure and to explain how Europe works together across borders to contribute to the protection of citizens and to make Europe a safer place. The next slide shows some of the promotion that we used, which was on social media and on and many media partnerships. We have some very nice videos that we did for this campaign, and some of those we managed to get them on TV, not as paid, but necessarily, but as media partnerships with TV stations where they brought the heroes to speak on TV. If we go to the next slide, you'll see some of those local heroes, as we call them. These are the Lithuanian heroes, and we have people who have worked on projects from human trafficking to cancer prevention to illegal fishing, energy poverty. We realized in this campaign how important it is to have the local angle, and people really identify with the project or with the concept when they see that somebody from their country has a key role in this. So we paid a lot of attention to find those local chains of heroes that make these stories so real. The next slide shows you the results. Of course, this was a smaller campaign, smaller budget, smaller time frame also, but we're pretty happy with the results. And then very few words about the rural campaign, which was ran as a pilot campaign in a few countries, one of which was Latvia, your neighbor. And it was really to show rural communities all the things that EU does, because they often feel very abandoned and very distant from the EU. So we really were trying to reconnect. If we go to the next slide, you see that one of the key tools that we used was a road show, where we actually went to these places. We went to Letgale, is that correct? I can't. And other areas in regions, rural regions within the 7 countries that where we were in, and we went to fairs, we went to events, and we had an EU stand there, this bus, EU bus, that explained a little bit, had people come, show, the beneficiaries showing their products and then speaking about them. So this was the concept, and it worked well, but then things happened. We had to stop that campaign because of COVID. So we didn't do the whole campaign in all the countries. So let me get now to the lessons learned, because I think this is more interesting for you, and then we'll also have a little Slido. So some of the key lessons for us are, of course, that every campaign has a different strategy, a different outreach plan, and those very much depend on the audiences and the objective of the campaign. The other thing we found that is very important is what I was saying first about knowing your audience is pre-testing, knowing, what topics the audience like or are interested in, and also testing as much as possible during the campaign. We did focus groups to check different approaches, and doing a lot of surveys to check that this was getting the result that we wanted. The other important lesson, it sounds obvious, but sometimes we forget, it's really about using the appropriate channels for that audience. And this is very key if you want to reach the audience in their place and not, assume that they're going to come to you. And then finally, the importance of measuring, monitoring, and adapting as you go along and evaluating your actions. There's this sheet that we have, this checklist for the corporate campaigns. If you find it interesting, we can make it available for you. But this is, our checklist of, have we managed all these different aspects when we're planning a campaign. And now, Lemones, we're going to have a Slido.
Yes. Just 1 second. Yes, now we do have an open question linked to these changing times and changing ways how communication is happening. So the question here for the audience is, how are the influencers and the use of social media is changing the way you communicate, or the way European Commission is communicating to its citizens? What do you think? What is their influence, if there is any? You can also write that you don't notice anything. So again, go to slido.com. The code is K0930. And it's an open question. How do you think these new ways of communicating using social media, influencers, changing the communication? And I don't know, Tina, if you're able to see what people are actually answering.
Not very well, I must admit.
I will read to you, perhaps if Gedri you can scroll from the top. People say communication is becoming more personal, more fun, more close to people. Some people say it is drastically changing for sure. Social media usage reaching more young people. In Lithuania, it works better with younger generations. It makes communication better and more clear. Influencers help to reach more people and to avoid boring institutional way to communicate. That actually these tools bring European Commission and audience closer to each other. And people even say that social information or communicating through social media is, in general, transformational.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's very, very interesting, constructive for us, because we see that this is something we've been doing, obviously, and it's working. And I did mention that, social media is one of the channels, it's not the channel, but working with influencers and doing collaborations has really changed also the way we work, and we let's say we cede control to a certain extent of the message to the social media influencers, so that they can say it in their words. Which is much more, understandable and closer to what citizens want to hear. Great. So let's move on then to show that something went well. So in terms of the EU image between 2014 actually, and then from 16 that you see here on the slide, and 19, that trust towards the EU was at the highest level since 2014 during the elections and after the elections. So things were moving in the right direction. We don't take credit for all of it, though we'd like to, but no, I'm kidding. We were at a good point, and then, next slide. COVID happened. And the coronavirus has changed things. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see that there's a survey that the European Council for Foreign Relations did in April. And I repeat April because things have evolved since, but we don't have these figures. But it's important to show that at that time, this is a snapshot where they asked if Europeans saw the EU as relevant during the pandemic. And you see that only 19% agrees that the EU was relevant in the crisis. But then when they're asked about what is the need or whether there's a need for a greater EU cooperation in the crisis, 63% agree that there is such a need. So what we see there, it's a gap between the expectations of more EU and the perception of the reality on the ground, which is we're seeing less EU. So if we go to the next slide, just to remind you a few of the many, there's actually 800 measures that the EU took during the crisis and is still taking. To deal with key elements, whether it was solidarity at the height of the early stages of the crisis, bringing back people, stranded Europeans, making green lanes to make sure that the food could come through the different borders that were closed, reopening the EU in a more systematic way, and then taking all the actions to help the economy survive the crisis with the unemployment benefits, the supporting workers, and a lot of other emergency measures. And of course, all the work that's being done on vaccine strategy to make sure that we negotiate contracts with vaccine producers to have an accessible and reliable vaccine as soon as possible. So when we see all that activity, we are we realize that there was a huge communication challenge to make sure that all this that happened can be also perceived and understood by citizens or the average citizen, and especially in July when the recovery plan was agreed by the heads of state. And this recovery plan, as you know, is a historic agreement to boost the resources of the EU in a way that we can really support the member states to recover, start the economy, and really address all the key lessons of the crisis, where it's health and other coordination and etc. So where do we come in now? The next slide, please. It's about communicating this. So we are going to be doing a corporate campaign on the recovery and recovery plan and the Next Generation EU program, which is the name of the new program. So let's see what this will imply. This campaign will be an umbrella campaign because it will look at the recovery as a whole, but also at the different aspects, whether it's economic, the health, and the twin transformation of digital and green, which is at the heart of the recovery. The next slide will show you the fact that we want to show how ambitious this plan is, how much it's based on the twin engine of the Green Deal and the digital transformation, and that with the campaign we want to take these messages to a wider audience because this has been, I think, the biggest obstacle so far in people knowing all the things that are happening. And they don't need to know all, but they need to know some key elements. So our objectives are to raise awareness of the EU response, but the elements that are interesting and relevant to citizens in their daily life, to rekindle the European spirit that we had gotten to a certain extent up again, and then, you know, we feel that there were we lost many Europeans. You remember how Italy was extremely critical because of the perceived lack of solidarity. And then finally, to strengthen the trust in the EU institutions' capacity to be able to address the crisis and to really kickstart the recovery. So the scope of the campaign is going to cover all member states, and as I said, the focus will be on dissemination, and we hope to be able to start it in the next couple of months. We're working very hard on that, and the target audience for that is mostly people. We'll segment by age, but look at people who have been particularly vulnerable to the effects of the crisis. Moving on now, the next campaign that we're preparing and where we're going to need everybody to chip in is about the Green Deal, which, as you know, is the blueprint for the European transformation, and to allow Europe to deliver on its goal of becoming the first climate neutral continent by 2050. So the next slide will show you how communication is so key to the implementation of the Green Deal. And it reminds us that it's not about various parts of society, but it's really about everybody together. And in fact, on Sunday, I saw an article about Sir Richard Attenborough, who, you know, is this famous director, British director, who did, amongst other nature series, The Blue Planet. And he has now opened an Instagram account, which broke the record of being having the most followers in a few hours. He broke Jennifer Aniston's record. And what he says in his first post is that how did he say it? How did he say it? The environment is or saving our planet is a communications challenge, and only communication can do that, which is an amazing thing for a director to say, but okay, he is a film director. So of course communication needs policy. So the next slide will show you all the different aspects, all the different policy aspects that lie behind this Green Deal. What it is about. There's more than 11 areas ranging from the climate pact to the energy package, to eliminating pollution, to all the funding, to the just transition, farm to fork, protecting nature and biodiversity. All these different aspects are all part of this Green Deal. So you can imagine that this makes communication at a corporate level quite hard. So we've broken it down into our campaign objectives, and those are about raising awareness of EU action for, you know, more sustainable Europe. And then making sure that we can get the public support to the initiatives that the EU is going to be taking and has been taking as part of the Green Deal. And then we've added a third objective, which is very tricky, very difficult. It's about convincing citizens to make sustainable choices and to change certain things in their lives. And this is what is called behavioral change. And this will be the trickiest part, I think, of this campaign. Let's look at the messages that we would like to pass with this campaign. of course, the objective, which is, to get Europe on this path of climate neutrality. You know that there's new targets for emissions that were announced by the Commission at the State of the Union address. So it's very important that everybody knows about, the problems and what we're doing about them, and what particular opportunities there are, whether there's funding, whether there's other actions and policies, what kind of opportunities there are for people to align to do something themselves about these policies. If we go to the next, the messages of the campaign, we have the fact of the responsible individual behavior, which is so important, and which makes it very important that everybody sees their role in this, and it's not like, oh, the government will take care of that, oh, the industry will take care of it. No, everybody has a role to play, and what we're trying to show with this campaign is that we all have to do it together, this whole society approach that I was talking about. The next slide shows you a little bit the audiences that we have been thinking about. An age segmentation, because different ages also have different channels, but also the attitudes, because as you can see from the next slide then, which is about the behavioral change that I was talking about, many people say that climate and the environment are worrying them, but a lot fewer say that they're doing something about it. And so we want to make sure that people are enabled, empowered to take action at their level to whether it's what they eat, how they, what transport they use, what their houses, how, the insulation of their houses, a lot of these things that they can do, or that each one of us can do as individual behaviors that can make a change when looked at it at a collective level. So finally, if we go to the next, I wanted to end with a more kind of let's get to work message, which was the message that the President von der Leyen gave at the State of the Union, about that the future will be what we make of it, and Europe will be what we want it to be. So let's stop taking it down, and let's get to work. And this is something that we of course are doing at our level, and we very much hope that we can work with you, together with you, to get those messages across, because they're going to be a very, very challenging period ahead. So I will stop there, and I think we have some more questions, Laminas?
Yes, we do. First of all, big thanks for the keynote.
Thank you.
And indeed, we do have some questions, so perhaps we can show them now to the screen. I think there were a couple of questions, so we'll just move on to the questions part. Yes. When you mentioned that something was not happening in Lithuania, of course, there is a feeling of missing out. So someone is asking actually why My Region, My Future was not organized in Lithuania.
Okay. Shall I answer now then?
Yeah. Perhaps, yeah.
Okay. So we would have loved to be in Lithuania, but I mentioned that this was a pilot campaign. We wanted to test it to see how it would work. And in fact, by doing it, we started the campaign in Latvia. As I said, we did one region from the north, the south, the middle. We tried to use one country in each from each group of countries, let's say. And we realized that it was a very, very difficult campaign to run from Brussels. because everything had to be so localized, because everything had to be really adapted. So we had a good result in the countries where we managed to do it, because we didn't manage to do it in all of them. But we realized that perhaps it's better for the partners in those countries to run these kind of campaigns, and not us at that level. But there's a lot of material that we can share. The Latvian material, maybe you can just see the type of stories that we use. We have a VR video, and we would have loved to do it all over Europe. But even without the coronavirus, I can tell you that we probably would not continue this campaign as a large-scale campaign, because these kind of rural audiences need a very special approach, and we would not be able to customize it to that extent unless, you know, I had a huge staff and we could work on it exclusively. So that's the reality.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So as far as I understand, it was not really EU-wide campaign, more a pilot. And I think you're coming back to a topic that we had also already today, the importance of communicating to rural communities, to smaller municipalities, and as you say, really speaking the language that people understand and that makes sense for them. All right, we do have a few more questions. There is one question. What do you think about involving employees in the communication campaigns, like sharing content, raising awareness, featuring EU employees in ads?
Yeah, we did it. We did it, actually. We call it staff engagement because we believe that this is something that empowers employees, staff, people because you have two roles. You're a citizen, and you're also an employee or a civil servant. So especially in the EU Protects campaign, when I showed you some of those chains of heroes, we had people who work in the various DGs or agencies. We also had them speaking about their daily work and how they see themselves contributing to the various solutions to the problems that we have. So we sent the TV, the video cameras in their office, and some of them were more, let's say, how can I say, not so comfortable, but it's not about, you know, being a video personality, you know, it's about being yourself. So we did it. And